Okay, hi everyone. We have quite a lot of people joining now. Hi, how are you doing? Hope everything's okay. Think I'll just wait for about 30 seconds to let everybody join in. Thank you so much for finding the time. I am personally very excited about the session and we're going to dig in just a second. Okay, quite a bit of people very happy with that. Okay, so I think we can slowly kick off and then the more people will join along the way, the better. So, welcome to the Procurement Trailblazer Panel. We are thrilled to have you here today for, I think it's going to be an incredible session. So, in this panel, we're going to dive deep into the personal journeys of our speakers as they've built and transformed procurement functions. So, whether you're starting from scratch or looking to optimize your current process, I think today's session will provide you with great insights and valuable lessons to apply right away. And to begin, I am excited to introduce our incredible speakers. Let me, I have a small technical issue. Give me 1 second. Apologies for that. Okay, let me reshare my screen. Something always happens, and I hope this is the only thing that's going to happen today. So,
You're up.
okay.
We can see it. Cape
Thanks.
Town is in the house. Okay.
Okay. Let me move on to our speakers. We have four amazing people today. I have had the pleasure of speaking to each of you before the sessions, hearing your stories, and I think the world needs to know about them too. So let me move on to present each one of you. So first we have Matthew Schultz. Matthew is the founder of MatChat, which is a procurement accelerator that brings next generation practitioners together to connect, collaborate, and advance their careers. He's a strategist, thought leader, and former executive with a highly respected voice in the procurement space. He's been featured at Amazon, LinkedIn, Spend Matters, and Forrester. Matthew is the former procurement strategist at Airbase, head of global procurement at world-renowned research firm Forrester, and head of global procurement at PE-backed fintech firm SS&C Asset. So Matthew, thank you so much for joining us today. We're excited to hear your
Thank you.
story. Great. Next, let me present TR Cannon. TR is a strategic procurement leader with over 20 years of experience driving transformation, innovation, operational excellence in the biopharmaceuticals and manufacturing industry. With his dynamic approach, TR specializes in optimizing procurement operations, talent development, and continuous improvement to enable growth, enhance profitability, and deliver increased customer value. TR is particularly known for his expertise in building and leading procurement centers of excellence. Throughout his career, TR has held leadership roles at prominent organizations, including Bristol Myers Squibb, CSL Behring, DXC Technology, and Merck. He works closely with business leaders to foster growth, mitigate risks, and optimize operational costs with a strong focus on delivering measurable outcomes and agile execution. TR, thank you so much for coming as well. Very happy to hear about your experiences.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have Adrian Cole. Adrian is a procurement leader with 3 decades experience in consumer goods, telecoms, and financial services. She has held global and regional procurement and supply chain roles at Procter & Gamble, Pernod Ricard, British Telecom, Microsoft, and Citi, transforming a wide range of both direct and indirect spend. Most recently, Adrian led procurement for a leading global luxury brand with $10 billion revenue, entering a new market segment. And she was the SME for procurement transformation at Irish Distillers for Noricard. Adrian, thank you so much for joining. I find your story with Irish Distillers very exciting, so very happy to hear more about that.
Thank you, Lana. My pleasure to be here.
Very happy to have you. And last but very much not least is Michael Tracy. Michael is a seasoned procurement leader with over 15 years of experience in both public and private sectors. At Trustpilot, he played a crucial role in establishing a world-class procurement function during the company's post-IPO phase, managing a $43 million annual spend and implementing scalable procurement processes. Michael's expertise spans strategic sourcing, supplier management, and digital procurement tools, with a focus on driving efficiency and supporting organizational growth. His broad experience allows him to effectively leverage procurement to foster innovation and operational excellence. Michael, once again, thank you so much for coming. I couldn't thank all of you more. So
Thanks, Lada.
very exciting. So just before we dive in, a little bit of housekeeping. On the right-hand side, and I see that many of you have found it already, there is the chat button. Yes, thank you so much for everyone saying where you came from. And then right under that, we have the Q&A section, Q&A button. Please submit any of your questions that you have for the speakers. We're going to have a Q&A session at the end. Please do not wait with your submissions. We want to make sure we can answer all of your questions. And if you have any technical issues, please also let me know in the chat and I'll do my best to help you. And right before we move on, I'd like to take a second to introduce Precoro. This is the company that is bringing this event to you today. It's my favorite procurement tech company, although I might be biased. It's the one that I work for. It's a procurement software that helps companies at any stage organize and optimize their procurement processes. So whether you're a team of 50 just getting started in your procurement journey, or you're a larger organization seeking full transparency and control over your spend, Precoro is a very user-friendly platform designed to streamline purchasing, ensure compliance, and give you real-time insights into your procurement activities. So in short, we can take your procurement from this to this. Thank you very much for bearing with me for this very short introduction, and I can't wait to dig into the event itself. So I think we're going to move on to our first section in a second, where we're going to talk about stories of our speakers establishing procurement functions. So Matthew, you're up first. You've stood up procurement functions at multiple organizations, including SS&CS or Forrester. Can you share the story of how you approached these projects, especially as employee number one in some cases? What were your first steps?
Yeah, of course. It's interesting that you asked that. And I guess first and foremost, thanks for putting this together. Great to be here. What an esteemed panel. Thank you very much. I actually start the process during the interview. And I think a lot of people think, huh, that doesn't make much sense. But you can glean so much information during the interview process. I make it a habit. I think sometimes folks will say, oh, I've got to meet with 6 or 7 people. I'm trying to meet with at least a dozen. And the reason I do that is because I want to see where the company is in terms of their understanding of what procurement can do, what type of thinking leadership has around it. So I'll meet with the C-suite, I'll meet with some of the higher end business leaders and end users, because it gives me context on where the company is with regard to their understanding of procurement or supply chain in general. I think maybe some of you have been following me and you've seen that I've posted or given away my 30, 60, 90 day. I think it's such a great way to frame an entrance on how to get in and set up a function. Within the first 30 days, I'm spending all of my time building relationships. So now that I've met so many folks during the interview, I'm now meeting them in person or over Zoom calls if it's a remote company. And it's so important for me because it's a way to set the expectation or manage the expectation. I'm also gathering more information from them. They often tell me, oh, you should meet with so and so, or go meet these 3 people, or meet these folks who buy things consistently. It's super helpful for me because, one, I tout the fact that I think relationships are one of the top priorities for all next gen procurement professionals. But it also allows me to start collecting data, which moves me into days 30 through 60 and 60 through 90. During the next month, I'm pulling all the information I've been gathering, along with the AP file that I grabbed during the interview process, to understand where are we spending money. That's so helpful. And I think it's often overlooked because procurement hasn't existed before. When it comes to day 90, I'm already looking at technology. What am I going to buy to help infuse process efficiency within the organization and take all that data and information that I have and make data-led decisions? I'm also starting to build out my team. Who am I going to hire within the next 3, 4, 5, 6 months? And the bonus, I'm already looking ahead for the next year. What can I expect in savings? What can I expect in technology implementation? What can I expect with the team?
Oh, that's amazing. I think it's a great way to have a structured process, or what are your expectations for different periods? A lot of people a lot of stakeholders might expect a lot from you in the first 30 days. It's good to have a sort of more extended plan, as you said. And then
Absolutely.
what advice would you give to someone who's starting from scratch, particularly in terms of building the team and implementing the right technology?
Yeah, I think, I think I alluded to it a little bit in that while you're having those conversations with business leaders, you really understand who's been buying, where they've been buying from. Things are often sitting in Word documents, Excel spreadsheets, shared folders, worse email inboxes from somebody who left the company. And if you can start extracting all of that data and information, you can then plan out where you're heading. And again, for me, it was somebody who would complement. Like I love going around and educating, communicating the organization on procurement, and then infuse modern technology to take care of some of the automations and make things much easier in terms of process. And I'll complement myself with a fellow teammate who is more analytical or administrative, and they can help be an operator. And I think having that, similarly, you'll see companies, they'll have co-founders. Well, you've got one that's on the business side, and then you have another person who's more technical. And I usually supplement or complement rather my skill set with somebody who can do that.
Makes a lot of sense. I hope all of you are taking notes, and if you aren't, there's going to be a recording available afterwards. So just listen in. Okay, I want to ask Michael, because I didn't introduce it at the beginning. Let me just say it a little bit organically. We have very different stories gathered here. So we have Matthew and Michael, who are a little bit more on the software indirect procurement side. And then we have TR and Adrian, who have amazing experience in manufacturing, TR in more biopharmaceuticals, Adrian with Irish distillers. She's going to talk a little bit more about that. I think you have a very curious case. I've told you about it already, so very excited about that. And so advice is going to differ according to the experiences. So if you came here, either you need help with your indirect, with your procurement function focused on indirect or manufacturing, just listen in. There's going to be more advice from different perspectives. But yeah, moving on to Michael. When you joined Trustpilot, you were immediately tasked with establishing the procurement function from scratch. It was very rapidly growing post-IPO environment. So what were your initial steps? What was the context that you walked into? What did you do?
Sure thing. And first of all, everyone, I need to apologise because I'm Scottish and I'm very Glaswegian. So if there's anything that I say that people don't understand, I know Lad has put out the LinkedIn profiles there. Feel free to message me and I'll translate into English. Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. Joining Trustpilot was crazy, absolutely crazy. Prior to that, for some context, I was about 10 years within the public sector, which is very slow, very methodological, and follows process, sometimes for process sake, as we all know. We've all been there. Joining Trustpilot, one of the first contracts we looked at, for example, was one of the biggest contracts, our Amazon Web Services contract, where the platform lives. And we negotiated that in 2 weeks and had a contract signed, compared to 6 months to a year in public sector to do a similar thing. So that gives you an idea of how quickly you had to move and had to react to the situation within the startup environment. Kicking off, we had nothing at all. So I joined, and fortunately at the same time, they had already started hiring a team prior to me joining as well. So I was quite fortunate to have bodies to be able to do some work. But yeah, definitely the first thing that we did was try to understand where we are today. Understand how people buy things currently, which meant interviewing everyone across the organization to try and get that understanding, and then start off with the process and drafting that down. At the same time, analyzing all the financial information, all the invoices that we'd been paying to try and build that database, that view of what do we actually have, because as a startup, while the company's growing, the headcount, the people changed all the time, so someone might have bought something 6 months ago, but they were no longer in the organization, and nobody had any record whatsoever. Back to Matt's point about, things were on spreadsheets or PowerPoints or Word documents or somewhere, probably saved on their desktop. That's gone, So the only thing we could go by was invoices and what was going through the finance system, which fortunately was quite robust for us. So yeah, there was a big element of managing the expectations within the organization to say, look, this isn't going to be an overnight fix, and in fact, it wasn't even going to be a 12-month fix. This was going to take some time to really get a function up and running properly, and smoothly. And once we had that buy-in from the board, who were the people that had dictated that we had to be there, then things started to become a bit easier, a bit simpler. The most difficult part with the rest of the organization was taking people from having no rules as to how they buy things to starting to introduce the concept of actually you need to now be responsible for what you're spending. So yeah, so there was a few challenges first and foremost, but the main thing was to understand, what do we have? How are we doing things just now? What have we bought already? And pulling together that background information so that we had some sort of platform to launch from.
Well, that sounds very familiar to me. I love startups overall, and then just seeing this chaotic process from time to time. I've spent my fair share of time trying to convince founders to look into procurement, so that sounds very, close to my heart. Okay, and then what do you think are some of the key things that people often overlook when they're trying to set up a procurement function in a company so fast-paced as Trustpilot was when you joined?
Yeah, so the main thing for me, and this is something that's stuck with me since I was a child, since I was a small child. I heard someone fairly famous once saying, "Without people, you're nothing." And that quote is always stuck in the back of my head. And it holds very true for what we are doing, and Matt's already alluded to it, that we're often looked as a financial department or a legal department or one of these governance type departments, but in actual fact, we are dealing with people, and we need to bring them on board, and we need to bring them along for the journey as well. So fortunately for me, and this is why I ended up at Trustpilot in the first place, I have always worked in IT. Whether I was originally sales, I've been a technical trainer, I've failed miserably at being a technical person, and then moved into procurement. So I know the people, I know the world, I know how they communicate, and it was about adapting the way that we work as a department to speak to the people, get them on board, bring them along for the journey with us, and once you've got them, you can do anything, you can achieve anything at all.
No, amazing. Actually, what you said about failing to be a technical person. I had a conversation with somebody a couple of days ago, and they said so many people don't go into procurement because they think it's numbers. But what it is, it's people. You have to talk to people. It's all negotiations. It's all connection
That's it.
stakeholders. So As long as you have access to a calculator and possibly an Excel sheet, you're fine. You'll be okay.
That's it. Everything else will come. Yeah, as long as you can manage the relationships and the people, it will come. Yeah.
That's great. Let's move on to Adrian. Adrian, your experience at Irish Distillers, I've said already so many times, it's unique because you developed a procurement function from scratch within a well-established manufacturing company, which is very rarely the case. So can you walk us through the context when you started, what your first steps, what did you do? How did that happen?
Yes, sure, with pleasure, Lada. Yeah, so as you say, really a unique opportunity. So Irish Distillers, for a little bit of context, is the Irish subsidiary of Pernod Ricard, the second largest spirits company in the world. So in Irish Distillers, we made Jameson whiskey, among other whiskies, and Jameson is a runaway success story. It's now the biggest selling Irish whiskey in the US. And sales of Jameson globally tripled in 10 years during the period I was with the company. So very, very fast moving, as well as being a manufacturing company. It's also really a marketing company. It is effectively FMCG, food and bev. It's very, very marketing driven. So within Pernod Ricard, Irish Distillers is quite a large and quite an influential subsidiary. So a very unique opportunity, as you said, being able to join a procurement function and be given a blank sheet of paper, while at the same time having a mature, very profitable business that you work within. Normally, you're in a mature business where you're kind of fixing things as a procurement person, or maybe expanding things or changing something, but you're generally dealing with a lot of pre-existing problems when you join a mature procurement function. Or you're in a startup environment where you have blank sheet of paper, but you don't have any money or any people. So joining Irish Distillers was a fantastic opportunity in that regard. It did at the same time come with some specific challenges from that context. So I think what I would put around there is that obviously you had a lot of established practices without procurement, so particularly on the indirect side, so in marketing, facilities, transport, all of these were happening without any procurement or any commercial oversight, effectively, or very minimal procurement functional oversight. Commercial oversight. And it's not a process organization. It's a very visionary, commercial, creative environment, but not a process-driven environment. So, and when you're in a business, as I say, that has just tripled the sale of its biggest product, there isn't a lot of problems that they feel need fixing in many scenarios. So you have to be quite careful about how you tread with that, because actually they've not been doing procurement, which you think is very important, but they've actually been getting on very well without you. So you have to bear that in mind. So for me, I really started where I always start, and I'm going to be echoing what Michael and Matt have said so far. So, the first thing for procurement is the role of procurement is to create value. And value is a dynamic property. It changes according to the context that you operate in. So in some brands and for some companies, value might be, we need to get to market faster. It might be we need to change our products and be more innovative. It might be we need to cut costs. But value is different in every single scenario. So the first thing you have to do as a procurement person is to identify what is the most valuable thing that business is seeking in this period, and 1, 3, 5 years out. And your job as a procurement professional is then to translate that into what am I going to do to deliver and support that value from the procurement function and from the supply base. So once we'd identified, what were these key value drivers, then very similar to what Michael and Matt have said, for me, it really divides into kind of two buckets. And One bucket is what's the raw material? So the raw material for procurement is data. So you need numbers, you need to know who's spending what, where, and do you have any systems that contain that information or move information and flow and materials around? So you've got your raw material on one side, and you've got then relationships. So you've got this triangle, you've got to deliver the value. Your first step is what data, what raw material does this department have to work on? And what relationships do we have or do we need to put in place? And what do I need to make all of those three things strong and work together? And what I love about procurement is that it is a qualitative job and a quantitative job. You need qualitative soft skills to meet people, to build relationships, to find out what they want, to find out what bugs them, and then to work with them to affect change. And yet you also need to be able to be quite quantitative as well. So it's a fantastic combination of those two things. And it's really important to get that balance right, which I think is very similar to what the other guys are saying. So what I would also say in our environment was we had a great mandate. The board had decided that there should be a procurement function, and we had some team members, which was great, and that kind of reflected this is quite a profitable, well-funded environment. What was maybe difficult is that although the mandate was there, the understanding was not there. So the board had agreed, and all the relevant directors had agreed we should have procurement. We're very supportive, but it's not actually that they understood necessarily what that would mean and what it would mean for their teams and themselves and the business. So, what was going to need to change was the unknown, and was kind of a brand new future for them. So in terms of the first steps, it was really around understanding, what is the landscape for the data and for the relationships, and then taking the very broad brush roadmap that had been established for procurement by external consultants, and my job was to turn that into reality. What are these people and future people actually going to have to do to make that happen? So we launched a couple of initiatives in tandem. We had a procure to pay transformation. We had a whole set of upskilling, strategy development, categories, sourcing, upskilling for all of the team and recruiting the team, etc. And really trying to establish a harmonized and a strategic workflow for the procurement teams. And then pointing to the stakeholders as well, forging those relationships, mapping them out, who needs to be leading and owning different relationships, what do we want from them, what's the best way to structure them that meets those people's needs. And then also really identifying some quick wins. So, people come to you when you have done something useful for them. So we really needed to get some of those wins in place so that people thought, okay, I don't really get all of the things that these people do, but I know they helped me when I had this problem. And I know they did a good piece of work there. So I'll go and ask them again, and maybe this is something they can help me with too. You've got to get some wins in and look valuable and look useful and be valuable and useful. And then I did a great deal of work in terms of defining success. What does success look like for the procurement function? And we had a very enlightened CFO who was very supportive of measuring things other than cost savings, really holistic things. So we had a really comprehensive set of metrics, which I developed, that would capture our contribution across value, innovation, risk, sustainability, as well as financial metrics. And the financial metrics, including getting the cost right the first time, as well as retrospective cost savings.
Thank you so much. I think it's a very comprehensive overview. And I love how you said that sometimes for sort of management or board of directors, they have made the decision that they want to introduce a procurement function, but they don't realize how much is there ahead of it. That's one of the things that got me very passionate about this question in the first place, is that you as a first procurement professional, as somebody who is established in the function, you get hired into it, you're excited. At first, the board is also excited to finally have you there. But then that's 1% of, the hiring the first person. And then there is the 99% of figuring out where you are, what are, how it's going right now, where are we spending money, how can we, all of that comes later. And I think a lot of the times companies are just not ready for that. And I think that this event in particular and events of this type are great, preparing people who are about to establish a procurement function themselves for what the road is about to be. If you've never done it before, it's not going to be easy, but it's going to be fun. So thank you so much for sharing your experience. I find this conversation already very inspirational. I liked it even before the event itself. I like talking to you for it. Okay. Let me move on to TR. TR, thank you so much for just being in the background for now. You've had, again, amazing experience as well setting up procurement functions in different settings, but primarily in pharmaceutical industry, so medical device manufacturing, etc. Can you share your story of how you approached building the procurement function from scratch in such highly regulated industries? And what are your priorities when you do that?
Sure, Lada, great question, right? And as I was listening to others, I was trying to think, why is this different? So when you're working with a regulated industry like pharmaceuticals, think about the products those companies make and how important that is. So the way we approach this was a very systematic way where quality was the most important thing in this case, right? So the scenario for me was a large biopharmaceutical company that made vaccines and other life-saving therapies. It grew by acquisitions. It had plants all over the globe, multiple regions, and everybody was operating. They're buying stuff, right? So everybody's operating within their own sites. The company had a very interesting problem. They made so good products that the demand was so much more than they could supply. So the leadership took a step back and said, how do we fix this? How do we grow? And not just for sales, but how do you help the patients if you can't sell your medicine to them? So they kicked off, they got board approval, they kicked off a transformation of the entire company. So they wanted to really create a global operating model, and procurement was one of the work streams. And I was not there. I was lucky enough to be recruited into the role. We called my work stream the source to pay work stream. So that's how I got in. I was lucky to get in. So my first priority was to understand those external regulations, right? So you have your FDA and similar kind of organizations all over the world. So they have regulation, there's good manufacturing practices, there are other kind of global standards that applies everywhere, right? So how do you ensure that quality and compliance becomes your North Star? Like that's like non-negotiable now. And then I focused on three different aspects, right? So one was a strong foundation. So like, do we have these global policies and procedures? How do you document everything, right? So you can't have processes in emails and somewhere else, because not only it's good practice internally, external agencies come and ask you, show me, in this case, right? So building a strong foundation was important, and everybody should know what clear roles and responsibilities were. Like, what is the role of procurement? What is not the role of procurement? Luckily for us, we also had funding. Sorry, excuse me 1 second.
No worries at all.
Something in my throat. So we had funding to invest in technology also, and we got cutting edge ERP. So we wanted ERP as a strong foundation, but add on your e-procurement systems to it, your supply management tools to it, your CLM systems to it. And technology played a very critical role, not just for efficiencies and effectiveness, but also to maintain compliance. In this case, also ensuring that all these activities were ready for an audit when somebody comes and asks, show me how you did it, or what's going on. Last one, as touched upon by several people, is the stakeholder engagement. And in my case, was also talent, right? So how do you bring in talent that has worked in regulated industries, knows these kinds of things, but also is well versed in working with your quality department, your regulatory department. So these are unique departments that these companies have to kind of ensure that everything is working well.
Yeah, well, it's definitely a lot to take in. I think it takes a very the strategic mindset when you have so many moving parts, and it's not just about finding the right people, but as you shared when we were discussing before, this was also across countries, sort of across continents even. So that adds an additional layer of complexity.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Fascinating. To anybody who thinks that procurement is, fits in this tight little box, no, no whatsoever. You can go uh, to fantastic scale with this function. So, and then what are some common pitfalls companies encounter when they establish procurement in such complex environments, and how can they be avoided in your experience?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll have to talk about the customary change management, right? And which is important, and it's not for a lack of importance, but that people sometimes underestimate the importance of stakeholder alignment across the board, right? And sometimes you may think, okay, you may have resistance to deal with, but when you work in a regulated industries, you may have process issues, which may lead to fines, which may lead to bad quality, which may lead to reputational issues. So there's a lot of things at stake, so never underestimate that kind of engagement. So engaging the people early, often, and so on is going to be important. The regulatory landscape, the second one, is not static. Things change almost every day, right? So Europe may come out with some new regulations, or some Australia may do the same thing. So how do you keep up with those things? And when you're making decisions, speed is important, but you shouldn't rush to make some things happen at the cost of something else. So you need the right processes that's really watertight at the same time from a compliance standpoint. The last one I'll add is, this is not a one time deal, right? So it's not that you do this and you move on. You need this idea of continuous improvement. So that should never be neglected. So you need a way to sustain what was done and keep improving it, keep changing it. So that has to be continuously reviewed, both from an internal standpoint and from an external standpoint.
Great points for sure. I just looked at the time. I think we could have been here for much longer than 1 hour. Thank you, everyone, for sharing the points. I think that we will go to the key lessons, the advice that you have to give, and then go into Q&A session because we have a lot of questions already. Please, if you have not submitted your question yet, please go ahead and do so, either directed to one of the speakers specifically or to everyone, to the panel, and we will get to them. Please also submit them into the Q&A tab if possible, so that we can find all of them for sure. So let's go back to Matthew. You've emphasized before the importance of next-gen practitioners using modern tech and modern strategies in procurement. So how did you incorporate these into the functions that you've built? And what advice would you give to those looking to future-proof their procurement operations?
I like that, future proof. I do talk about this a lot, and I think let's add some context here. Let's take a step back and look at, I think it's interesting, TR, to hear your examples, or Adrian, yours, right? Like manufacturing. I almost lived my entire career in the indirect space, and I look at the direct, and you start talking about things like, you've got larger organizations. Leda, I think you did a good job by setting the context here. There is a difference, but if we're talking about people and understanding, well, how do I future-proof this? Learning the technology and understanding what modern technology is. So I think about this like quasi-analyst role at Forrester, looking at all of the new technology. I mean, hello, we're in one right now. And you've got these legacy tools, these ERPs, these older first generation S2P or P2P tools that did such a great job of getting us out of Excel spreadsheets, but we're still connected to them. It's inevitable. But now you've got this massive influx of money from venture capitalists and these founders coming out of nowhere that are like, I can go build something. Like, it's almost as if procurement was the last function within a business to get tapped. And it's happening right now, which is so exciting because you've got things like intake orchestration popped up out of nowhere. Like great marketing, by the way, but like workflows, which are so helpful. I've got this front door and it allows me to understand more data and information. And you've heard that from all of the panelists. So why that's so important is one, to go and understand what it is. Like take a demo, that's okay. Learn what it is and see if it fits into your company. Or reach out to somebody who maybe has done it. That's also helpful. So the reason I say that, like this idea of future proofing is just market awareness, understanding what's going on to stay relevant. I know it's hard because we've often been so heads down, literally clicking the buttons, pushing the POs through, using these antiquated tools. Like no more, it's automated. And then get this, like out of nowhere, I mean, AI's been around, but poof, it's public. Everyone's paying attention to it. All of these companies are now infusing it into their software. Just yesterday, I was speaking with a couple of founders. I'm in a conference right now, and they're talking about the next 6 to 12 months, 2025, what the new tools are going to look like, which honestly is quite interesting to think about. You know, within the span of 5 to 6 years, you have all these modern tools, and then oh, AI comes along. It's like, is that also going to change it? So, thinking about future proof, staying relevant, paying attention. Uh, Conferences are great, events are great, communities are great, webinars are fantastic. It's a way to stay relevant. Carve out time to do that because it's so easy to get caught up being heads down. The common theme of people here, that's another thing. Literally go away from your desk and talk to your colleagues because they're your customers and you'll figure out how to help them out. I think that is such a great way to stay relevant.
Absolutely. From my experience as somebody who works in a procure tech company, there have been so many. And the boom, to me, I tied it to the fact that the rest of the VC market went bust at some point around 2022 after the valuations went down. And then VC logic, okay, money, we can't invest into usual things. Sales, marketing, tech doesn't work out. Companies will want to save money, saving money, procurement.
Yeah.
So there
It,
was definitely. Yeah.
it's great that you bring that up because if you also look at the past handful of years, you've got, and I think everyone is touting this, supply chain disruptions, procurement hits the headlines.
Mhm.
Terrible macroeconomic climate, procurement hits the headlines. And it's like, what? Just getting tapped over and over again, process efficiency, getting the widgets, the things I need to run my company, and also, can you save us money? And now is literally the time. That's why it's really exciting, honestly. I mean,
Yep.
this happens. Like, when would this have happened? Probably never.
Yeah. I just put in the comment section just a little marketing integration. If you need to place a start, you can check out Precoro first. Let it be your first procurement site that you find out about. Okay, I think
Yeah,
that's
I think
great.
I'd add to that, Lad, on top of what Matthew's saying. I've observed the same trend with, how frequently does procurement appear in the headlines. And I think also what we've seen in that time is increasing focus on sustainability, which is a given now, and also the human rights element of ESG. So as supply chains got broken, and as things changed in COVID, I feel that something clicked with people somewhere that, okay, we need to kind of scrape below the surface of supply chains. And with the entry of AI as well, the penny also dropped. It's not any good anymore to send all your suppliers a statement saying, do you comply to all these things? And you're going to adhere to them and sign it and send it back to me. The curtains got drawn back and people need to look deeper into the supply chain. So there's a huge part for technology in that, but there's also a huge responsibility on procurement to actually think about in a very serious way and know about what's going on out there. And it's no longer your first tier suppliers. You've got to go all the way down. And that's a lot of effort and a lot of thought, and typically a lot of technology as well to make that happen.
That makes sense. Actually,
I think so. Sorry, Lada, if I can just jump in and play
No
a
worries.
little bit of devil's advocate, people. you know, in the IT world, we have the saying, a fool with a tool is still a fool, you know. So I'm hearing, Matt, you know, you're saying excellent things. Adrian, you're saying excellent things about, yes, the technology's there, AI's here. You need to get the basics right first. You need to understand why you need a system or a tool, because it's not going to solve all your problems. If you don't understand why you're buying something, it's just going to create more problems for you, you know. So you need to take that time, understand the process, understand what you're doing, have that basin right first of all, with the people on board. Then you can start to evolve. Then you can start to look at, right, how can I make things better? How can I make it sleeker? How can I take away the impact on my staff, you know, by automating things more? How you know, you can start to have those conversations with yourself and look inwards. But if you jump straight in and go, I need a tool to fix this, if you don't know what you're fixing, you ain't gonna fix nothing, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
I would like to add that I made a post on LinkedIn, I think, on Monday about how we had these calls on Friday and they ran over with all of the speakers. This is why.
This is
Because
why,
these
yeah.
are amazing people sharing amazing experiences. And I think we should make a part two, or at least extend this one. But yeah,
Yep.
I'm really sorry. I am not sure we're going to be able to cover all that we've planned and then all of the questions because there are so many. I think we'll get back to everyone. Let me jump to TR because you haven't spoken on this last topic. On the challenges of establishing procurement functions across countries and continents, as we talked about it a little bit already. So how do you approach managing that? Managing establishing a procurement function across so many locations? What strategies would you recommend others use to ensure consistency and compliance on a global scale?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I've had a change of my own mindset over the last few years. There's a time I used to say you need global processes. Everybody needs to do this exactly the same way, right? And then I realized why, right? So I started thinking, well, you need something that's fit for purpose based on a variety of situations. So you need that balance between having that global consistency with the right local flexibility. So some of the strategies were, okay, you have that overarching clear framework, but have some of those things but that you can adapt to local nuances, right? Whether it's regulation, whether it is customs, cultural, those kinds of things. And having that empowerment, like you should have each one of those regions and countries be empowered to make the right decisions, but you can't forget the governance, right? So you still need the right governance to kind of make sure that things are working, not working, and having that continuous feedback loop. So that way things are like still in control and not gets out of control. And finally, just a small plug for technology too, right? Because you need that single source of truth however you do that, right? I was just looking through, like, yeah, Excel is a great tool, but how do you like consolidate 500 Excels to kind of figure out what's going on? So having that unified platforms, whatever makes sense to you, and you don't, I mean, ERP is an ERP or source to pay, P2P and all, but you need the right sets of tools, right? And a tool could be anything. It could be a simple Power Platform automation to like visualization tools to CLM. There's a big spectrum right there. So finding the right tools, but start with what problem you're trying to solve. Technology by itself is, I think Mike was saying, right? You can make a bad process faster, right? What's the point of that? So work backwards from the results you're looking for, and then make sure it's the right tool and it's implemented the right way.
Amazing. I am terrified because I know that there is so much more insight that could have been shared. I have one question primarily for our speakers, whether you will have around 5 minutes extra so that we can finish with those insights, key lessons, and then go to Q&A. Because for both, I have a question for Adrian and I have a question for Michael. And I think they're both amazing experts at what they do. So I think it's very much worth listening. Adrian, I wanted to ask, when we've talked before, you've emphasized the importance of getting involved early in the value chain to influence procurement outcomes. So the KPIs, but as well, just the value chain overall. Can you tell a little bit more how people can apply this principle when setting up procurement functions, and what advice would you give to others on the importance of early involvement?
Yeah, of course. So it goes back to my first point, which is about the purpose of procurement is to create value, and value changes according to the context. So if some examples I would say is around, say, for example, in the case of product launch, what is much better than saving money later is to get the target profit margin that you want in the beginning, and also obviously to have a product that works, to have processes and distribution methods that work. So you want to get your product out there, you want to sell it in a profitable way from the beginning, and you want to be able to distribute it and have sufficient capacity and have a high quality, well-functioning product. So so that's an excellent example of procurement working its way up the value stream. You really want to be very well integrated with your marketing and your R&D teams in a product launch scenario, and you can replicate that across the rest of the business. So, you know, the worst position for procurement to be in is that the people come to you and they say, now I've made all that product and I've selected the supplier and we've designed everything, we've set up everything, can you get 10% off the price? And they sent us this piece of paper, could you sign that? That's the worst. That's the end of the value chain. And so your mission as a procurement person, and this has certainly been my mission every day I've gone to work for 30 years, is to work your way wherever you are on that spectrum, get to the left of it and just keep going upstream, upstream, upstream. And the way to do that is to build relationships. And it is also to understand what those people are trying to achieve. So it's very easy to say, oh, those marketing people are useless. God, they design all these things and they don't know, and they've got all this money and they don't spend it and they don't do this and they don't do that. No, those people are there with a set of objectives, and generally speaking, they come to work to do the best they can every day as well. So what you need to understand is you have to be in the shoes of those people. What are they trying to achieve? What is their workflow? What are their obstacles? And understand where you can benefit them and work together with them to help them. So every time you do that, you move a little notch to the left and they will invite you back later and you will start one step over. So, but you have to put some time and effort into understanding the world outside your own procurement department, because otherwise you're always at the end of the chain. So when you unite around common objectives and you demonstrate that you have a sophisticated understanding of the business, of the market that your business operates in, and the objectives and processes and of your colleagues, and that you value them, that's when doors start to get opened, and then you're invited into the room. And once you're in the room, you have the stage then set so that you can demonstrate how, for example, talking to a different set panel of suppliers or making a small change to a specification, or introducing a new material, for example, can really change things, or just asking some challenging questions can change things. So once you allow yourself access to the stage, then you can start to change hearts and minds, and the people will invite you back. And it's a really exciting place to be. Nobody wants to be stuck out in the last corridor and somebody says, can you get me 10% off the price? That's very boring when you're a procurement person. It's the other side that's much more fun and much more interesting and much more involved and engaged with the business.
Amazing. I think it was the right call to ask you the question, and then I'll have the last question for Michael, which is actually on a very similar topic, and then we'll go over to the Q&A session. So Michael, again, when we talked before, you told me that setting up the procurement function in Trustpilot involved a lot of interaction with other departments. And that was sort of your focus. So having one person who is working with one specific department. So can you talk a little bit about key strategies that you use to educate stakeholders and get buy-in for procurement processes? As you said, a lot of them did not have prior experience. That was a bonus, but also a drawback, because you had to be the one to tell them how it's supposed to work. So if you can tell
Eh,
about that, Ben.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was an interesting challenge within Trustpilot specifically. Is one of their great strengths as an organization is they gave people an opportunity. They were a young company, and they gave young people an opportunity to progress their career, and a lot of people did really, really well from it. Others tried it and it wasn't for them, and that's fine. But yeah, that meant that there was an awful lot of people in senior roles without that experience in other organizations, to understand how things operate and how things work. And, to echo, oh, sorry, my laptop's doing weird things. You still hear me okay? Yep, still hear me. Don't know what's happened to the camera, but you can still hear me. So yeah, to echo what Adrienne was just saying there about, it's all about the hearts and minds, and knowing that the bulk of the organization within Trustpilot were tech, I then utilized the ITIL framework. So as opposed to looking at things like SIPs, which most of us here have studied at some point in time, or World CC or IACCM, or one of the many frameworks that that talk about procurement and supply chain management and all that kind of good stuff. So rather than going down a sort of traditional procurement route, I took the learnings from ITIL, the ITSM, IT Service Management rule book, if you like, or framework, and distributed the staff that I had directly into the different departments. So rather than looking at the sort of more traditional, you deal with this type of contract, it was everyone deals with every type of contract, so it doesn't matter what your area was looking for, whether it was marketing spend, whether it was IT spend, whether it was, a night out at the pub with the team, it didn't matter. They were dedicated to that department, and they would then deal with any procurement requests, any spend requests that department had. So it meant then that the management and also the staff within those departments looked upon us as just simply part of their team, and then using that, we were able to, it's a bad way to put it, but we were able to manipulate the situation to then get a seat at the table at their team meetings and have a 10-minute slot to say, this is what we're doing in procurement. We've analyzed this, and here is the initiative for this quarter. And we ran very basic, very simplistic workshops that only lasted maximum 15 minutes, entitled random things like, demand management, or in brackets, do you really need to buy that thing you think you need to buy? And really, putting it at the level of the technical people that we were dealing with, and talking their language and getting on board with the way that they think. So rather than, I know a lot of organizations talk about people being their true self within the organization, it worked better for us to be a chameleon and actually change the way that we think and the way that we operated to work in the way that our stakeholders like to operate, to talk their language, to then be able to change our processes, make sure that we had all the appropriate governance steps in place, but to make sure it's fully scalable and we can move and change with regards to the way that our stakeholders needed to work, because that's the way that their mind operated. So yeah, it was interesting, and I saw someone had posted up in the chat that we need to have a degree in psychology to work in procurement, and it's absolutely that. It was all about understanding how the organization works, how the people think, and then adapting the kind of historic traditional ways of looking at procurement to the framework that they operate in. and understanding that framework and working in that within those guidelines that they have, and you know, being flexible about everything and being seen as being part of the team as opposed to a blocker, a person that's there to implement rules, you know.
Great. Thank you so much, Michael, and thank you so much, everyone. I know that this was the cutoff point where we're supposed to stop the session. So if anybody has to run, completely understandable. We have lots of questions in the Q&A chat, just lots of questions. And I have to make an executive decision and pick one and say that I will get back to you on all of those questions. I'll follow up with our speakers so that we can have compilation of answers. I found a question that I think will be interesting, but it will have to be a sort of fireside situation from each one of you. So let me share it on stage. When building a procurement function from scratch, what are your top 3 things to get done firstly? And can you all agree on them? So what are top 3 things that you have to done first? Whoever wants to go first.
I think we've all kind of echoed in certain ways the same sentiments the whole time. You know, it's about understanding what you've got, what you're doing with it, and the people. And it's really as simple as that, I think, you know. There's nothing more procurement's not complicated. That's why I do it for a living. You know, if it was a complicated job, yeah, I'd be off doing something simpler. You know, I don't want to work for a living. You know, I want to do, you know, nice things. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's the kind of 3 key things for me anyway. You know, and I think everyone's said similar throughout the term, but please correct me if anyone disagrees.
Yeah, I was just going to add, Mike, like you got to start with the outcome too, right? Like what does the end goal look like? What does good look like? What are you trying to achieve? Is it a, you know, better process, buying better, cost savings? All of those things, I would embed that somewhere within those 3. Because if you don't know your end goal, how do you know that you got there?
Yeah, I would agree. I think the top 3 things I always say are business acumen, understanding the business model and how it works so that you can support it. Technology literacy, understand modern tools so that can help you. And then most importantly, relationship building, connections internally and externally. It's interesting, Ryan just wrote in the chat, who I recently met, a new founder, and he said the same thing, right? Like people overcomplicate this. And that's true because we start getting caught up in all these procedural administrative types of things. And the reality is the difficulty are the people. How many questions or comments in here have been like, but how do you do it? How do you talk to the people? That is in and of itself one of the biggest challenges. The education, communication around what good procurement looks like. And here's the thing, it's evolving.
Yeah. And I think, sorry, just to add on to that as well, it's okay to fail.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It's okay to get it wrong, to try something, get it wrong, and then change, you know, change your strategy, change the way that you look at things, you know. So yeah, okay, you might think you know what good procurement looks like, but then once you try it, it might not be for that organization.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a great point. Don't stick with a failing plan.
Sounds good. Thank you all so much for coming to the session. Stick around with me for just 1 second. I will post our speakers' LinkedIn pages in the chat if anybody's missed them. So you can go ahead and follow them because all of them are doing amazing work. So please go ahead and follow them there. And if you like this session and you want to have more awesome sessions like this, you can also follow me. I put a link as well. Thank you so much to all of the speakers. Just as I thought, amazing conversation, amazing insight. Thank you so much for coming. And I would so love to have you here again. So thank you very much. Hope everyone has.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Guys.
Thanks for
Be
joining
well.
us.
Good one. Bye.